Good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us. It's exciting to be kicking off DAMFest Europe, of course, and we've got so many amazing participants today, so many wonderful speakers, and I am, of course, honored to be your chair. And I was asked to give a short introduction today and maybe talk a little bit about DAM in Europe. We're kicking off from London this morning. I am based here and have been based here for the last 3.5 years. And I like to still think of this as Europe, of course, despite political events going on. And it is a big day for the world, is it not, with the American election going on and all the changes that are happening around the world. So let's dive right in and talk about our year and sort of how DAM in Europe is going, and not just, of course, here, but also beyond and throughout the world. For those of you who don't know me, I've worked in digital asset management for about 15 years now. And before that, more broadly in web content management, IT, and just general internet technology since 1995. So here it is, 25 years later, and I find myself still doing variants of the same thing. But it's a wonderful time to be in digital, isn't it? Because there's been a great digital imperative this year, not just for digital asset management, but of course, across all the different avenues of digital that we might be working in. So as I mentioned, I've been a consultant in this space, an analyst in this space. I have a book that's called Digital and Marketing Asset Management that's all about this particular field that we work in. So for those of you who I haven't met before, it's very nice to meet you, and I look forward to being your guide for the day. So, you know, how's your lockdown going? We're probably back in lockdown, most of you, wherever you are. Here in England, we're about to go back into a very severe lockdown, similar to the one in the spring. I think that, you know, for all of us, let's face it, it's been a difficult year, even if our businesses may have been booming because we work in digital. We've gone through sort of days of disbelief, days of counting. I think we're all still wondering, when is this going to be over? And I know that I really miss seeing all of you. I miss seeing people in person. I wish we were all together in a room right now and on a stage. And I know that I was really excited when I was able to get a professional haircut back in July, but now I'm going to have to, of course, go a few more months without one. And then here we are. Sometimes we think, gosh, we're all stuck together in this room. It's like no exit. It's like huis clos, as the French would say. There's sort of no way out. We have a very limited view of the real world right now because we can't really go much of anywhere. But what's wonderful about digital is that it has kept us connected to each other. We all got so excited to get Zoom working and to get Microsoft Teams working. And I think about back in March when we first went into lockdown in London, it's amazing how some of my smaller clients really had no infrastructure set up to really work remotely and to collaborate remotely. And this is part of what has catapulted us into this new working world that we live in. It's like been, you know, almost like the discovery of fire. It's like finally we're able to get to where we need to be in terms of remote working, collaboration, because we've been forced to do it by the situation. So I guess part of the thing we've learned this year is that, you know, change has been forced upon us. Our human ecosystem has really been kept alive by the digital one. We went to Zoom and Teams, not just for our conference calls, but also for our cocktails and to stay connected with our colleagues and also with those we loved. And we even went on virtual trips, whether those virtual trips were to real places or to Rivendell. This is what we were all sort of forced to do to make things seem a little bit more normal. Now, what's interesting, I think, specifically about DAM in Europe is that, and technology in Europe, and of course, Europe as it exists now, is that we can't unravel our connectedness. And I think this is a wonderful thing, that we can't just suddenly snap our fingers and pretend that we aren't connected in ways, despite what we try to do to disconnect. You know, we're connected via our data, we're connected via our train networks, we're connected via many long-standing agreements and collaborations that we've all had as countries and nations and people working together. And I think this hopefully will be how we will get past these difficult times that we've all endured. And of course, if I could just throw in a little joke for the morning, it seems that the women are doing a better job these days, I think, keeping us all together. But that might be debatable, but there's some interesting articles written about that one. So just a little tribute to some of the fine European leaders holding things together in various countries. Hopefully I've got some German and Finnish friends on the call here that are appreciating those pictures. So I think it's good to talk about what's specifically interesting about being in Europe right now. And I think that part of the reason that I moved over here are sort of, here's my 4 favorite reasons for being on this particular side of the Atlantic. And I think specifically with technology and product development, part of what really fuels innovation here is, of course, the astonishing diversity of cultures we have within just a couple of time zones. This fuels a lot of innovation and a very healthy competitiveness that, frankly, I never saw in North America, and that I still don't see there in the same way. It's just not as much of an international perspective. I think it's interesting that specifically in the dam industry, North Americans, and I say that talking both about Americans and Canadian companies, have looked here to really acquire best of breed dams. So when you think about who Aprimo has acquired, Adobe has acquired, Sitecore. Of course, Sitecore originally a Danish company, but really has been ruled and managed from San Francisco and Silicon Valley for the last many years. OpenText, they've all acquired digital asset management systems and companies that grew up over here, and they saw the innovation that was coming out of Belgium and Switzerland, and really these smaller micro markets that have really shown their innovation, and so North America looked here for that and acquired those companies. I think it's really interesting how we all operate in very hyper-local and micro markets here in Europe. And those markets are to be taken advantage of. So whether you are an end user organization, a retail organization, a pharmaceutical company, doesn't matter what sort of industry you're in, every country has its own vendors, implementers, service providers, and many of them have global ambition. And many of them do succeed in expanding, well beyond Europe, or have succeeded in expanding beyond Europe. But I think what I find most interesting is, frankly, are the ones who know their niche like nobody else. And when I say that niche, I mean the ones that are particularly successful in for example, Germany, which is such a huge market, or within France, or within DACH, because they really know how to master certain markets and certain needs, and frankly, how to sell into and work within their cultural purviews and markets. And that's a really interesting thing, not just for buyers of technology. It's also really interesting for mergers and acquisitions. It's very interesting when bringing together smaller companies to tackle a more global project, to get those multiple perspectives. It's really interesting and useful to look both hyper-local and sort of into these micro markets. And finally, of course, this is, as I like to say, the center of the business world in terms of the time zones. And I know that since I've been over here, I've had a lot more opportunities to work with Asia Pac, because it's no longer the middle of the night. Here we are on the prime meridian. I live right about there. For those of you who know Greenwich, there you go. That's where I'm broadcasting from you this morning. I like to try to see, one of the few silver linings of this year is, of course, is to see people's homes. I think I've met my clients' pets and kids and spouses throughout the year on these virtual screens. And I often like to say, show me where you are. So that's where I'm coming to you from this morning. And I jog up that hill to the observatory most days to try to stay fit. One of the things that's also nice about Europe, of course, is it's great focus on the environment on this continent. I can't, unfortunately, say that about my native country the last few years, but hopefully that's going to change. But let's just briefly, as I close out my opening remarks, talk about sustainable development, because I think in the dam industry, many of us have been using systems for a long time, or we're moving to a new system, a dam 2.0 or a dam 3.0. Maybe it's the second or third system that we've had as an organization. We're going to have a great presentation later by my wonderful longtime client, Mark Gallagher from Unilever, who's going to talk about that, and moving from dam 1.0 to dam 2.0. And we think about how do we find a balance of social, environmental, and economic conditions that are, bearable and equitable and sustainable and viable for our organizations and for our companies. And so when we think about the pillars of sustainability, this is what they are. And if we take these to the digital asset management world, it's really about these three things that we often mention time and time again: people, process, technology. How do we take those three things and build a sustainable dam program? And I hope what you're going to get out of today is a lot of stories that talk about that and that explain that, and how these different organizations have hired the right people, trained the right people, analyzed and improved their processes, and purchased, implemented, optimized the technology to really use DAM in the most optimal way throughout the future. So as a final view, this is where we look at DAM today, is as part of a very big ecosystem. Back 15 years ago, when I first moved into digital asset management as an analyst and as an implementer, it was very much, as we all know, in a silo. It was a standalone system. And now DAM is part of this much, much bigger picture that's going to sustain our organizations for a very long time, that's going to enable personalization, that's going to enable a lot of the marketing and the marketing technology, really the digital marketing aspirations that we all have, and the content delivery aspirations that we all have. DAM isn't going to do that by itself. It does it as part of a larger ecosystem and as part of a much more sustainable program that considers all of these factors. So those are really my introductory thoughts today. And as I mentioned, I'm really looking forward to hearing from all the different speakers that are going to share their experiences with us.